this lesson, we'll cover sheets and placeholders. So we pretty much know what sheets are. Basically, a sheet is that piece of paper of a various dimension, typically with a title block that contains our views, or legends, or details. But you may ask, what is a placeholder? What does that have to do with a sheet? Well, basically, a placeholder isn't really a sheet, but it's a sheet in the sense of a list of sheets. So for example, if I look at my project browser in the lower left and I scroll down the sheets, I actually see sheets where I have sheet E101, E102, and so forth, all listed. These are actual physical sheets with title blocks and potential views and other elements on the sheets. But let's say we need to contain or make a sheet list, and we need to have different sheet names and numbers, or they reference an external source. Well, we can create what's called a placeholder sheet. Technically, it's not a real sheet for holding views. It's just a sheet that could be viewed within a sheet list. For example, let's create a sheet list. So let's go to your View tab, over to Schedule in Tables, and on the Schedule Table dropdown, choose Sheet List. This will create a new sheet list. For the actual fields in my sheet list, let's add sheet name and sheet number, and then click OK. So this gives me a listing of sheets that exist within this project that have views. But let's say we wanted to create a sheet schedule list of all the potential sheets we could have within this Revit project. Or we have sheets produced by other outside tools or outside programs that we want to include in this overall printed package. Therefore, we need a sheet legend or a sheet list. So what I would do here is I would add all of these other sheets that exist but not necessarily in Revit. To do that, simply select the data row, and then on the ribbon across the top for rows, click Insert Data Row. It'll add an unnamed row. Can do the same thing again, insert data row. And then all I have to do is change the name by changing it to whatever that sheet name would be. Maybe it was first floor electrical. So I could type in first floor electrical, or whatever name you want it to be. Second one, maybe it's the second floor electrical. And I could key that in, or whatever name you want it to be within the actual sheet list. And I can keep going and add those in and change the sheet number as well too. Now again, this is just making a sheet list. These sheets that I'm typing here technically do not exist within Revit, but they may exist within the package that you're printing. So what about sheets? Well, let's go back to the sheet where we were just at. Go ahead and close this sheet list just by clicking the X in the upper right. So on this sheet, we have views, we have a title block, and it's based on a various size. So how do we create a new sheet? Well, to do that, let's go to the View tab, and then in the Sheet Composition panel, I can click Sheet. This will create a new sheet that we can place views on. Now on the new sheet screen, you have two areas. One, you have a title block area where you can select a title block or load a title block in that you're going to place on your various sheets. The bottom part is if you want to convert one of the placeholder sheets that technically don't exist other than a name in the schedule, if you want to convert those to a real sheet. So the two that we just added, the 103 and the 104, we could technically make them a real sheet within the Revit project. That way we could put views on it, or text, or dimensions, or a title block. But if you just want to create a blank sheet, and name it something whatever you choose other than the placeholder sheets, simply choose the title block that you want to apply to this sheet on the top, and click OK. This will create a new sheet based on the title block size and whatever is in that title block. So as a review, in this lesson, we looked at sheets and placeholders. We looked at what's the difference between sheets and placeholders. Sheet is a real sheet within Revit that you can actually drop views on, dimensions, text, title blocks, and other elements. A placeholder is basically just a placeholder. It's a name of a sheet. For example, we created a sheet list. Now the sheet list, by default, is made up of all the actual sheets within Revit. But let's say your overall project has people outside of Revit creating detail views or drawings. They're going to be printed on a sheet, but it will not be in Revit. But the master sheet schedule or sheet list will be in Revit. Therefore, we need to add that text to the sheet list. This is known as a placeholder. That placeholder could later be converted into a sheet if we wanted to put that detail in Revit. And lastly, we looked at creating a sheet. In this lesson, we'll cover guide grids. So you may ask yourself, well, what is a guide grid? What does it do? Well, when we look at this sheet, we actually see multiple viewports. And let's say we had another sheet for level 2 or level 3 or east or west elevations, and you want the viewports on those additional sheets to be aligned or positioned in the same location on the sheet as they are on this sheet. You know, if you move a viewport around, there's no way of snapping a given point. That's where the guide grid comes in. Basically, it's a grid allowing you to snap your viewports to an intersection of a crossing within the guide grid. So let's take a look at that. To create a guide grid, first of all, open a sheet that has viewports, then go to your View tab. Once on the View tab in the Sheet Composition panel, click Guide Grid. If you already have a guide grid, it'll list under the existing. If you don't, create a new guide grid. I'm going to give it the name just Guide Grid 1. Click OK. Now by default, the guide grid is drawn covering the entire sheet. And this can kind of be, let's say, a little monotonous at times because it can hide lines and it's real busy. Also, the spacing within the grid may not be what you desire. So let's look at how we can modify those. First of all, let's look at the spacing. If you move your mouse over the edge of the grid, it'll highlight. You go ahead and left click it. Once you left click it, you'll see a guide spacing option in the property area on the left. You can change that. 25 millimeters, roughly 1 inch. You also see drag handles on the edge of the grid. This is very similar to crop, meaning you don't need to keep the grid visible across the entire drawing. You could resize this or think of it as cropping it to only see a visible portion of it, and then move the grid just to an area that you're working on or positioning a specific view. Now the grid still crosses the entire sheet. What we're doing though is just changing the window of looking at the grid so you don't see it across the entire sheet. To deselect the grid, just click in the background. Now, how does it work? Well, let's zoom in around this viewport on the very top. First thing we need to do is select the viewport. I want to move around the viewport itself until it highlights. Go ahead and left click it, and to verify you selected, you should see Modify Viewport on the ribbon, and in the property area it should say Viewport 1, meaning one viewport is selected. Now, all you have to do is use the Move command, and for example, move your grid lines or level lines to an intersecting point on the blue grid. And I'll zoom in a little more to illustrate this. I'm going to start the Move command from my Modify toolbar. I'm going to move over an intersection of my grid lines and or level lines, click it, and then move that intersection to an intersection of the blue grid. Click it. That then moves this view into a position locking it to the grid. And you would do the same thing to your additional sheet and the views on that sheet. Now if you wanted to move another view, simply mouse over the grid, select it, and then just drag this viewport window of the grid to the new location, and then repeat the process. Select the viewport, zoom in, choose the Move command, select an intersection of a grid or level line, and then move it to where you want it positioned on the actual blue grid, and then zoom back out. So in this lesson, what we looked at was creating the actual guide grid. We talked about how the guide grid can be used to position views in a specific location on one sheet and another sheet so those views line up from sheet to sheet. We looked at resizing the grid spacing and also cropping down the view of the grid so it doesn't cover the entire sheet. Lastly, we looked at moving our viewports by aligning our level or grid lines within the viewport to an intersection on the grid. In this lesson, we'll cover sheet and title block properties. So the properties of whatever you're looking at or clicked on display in the property area on the left. Same is true for sheets and title blocks. If I'm looking at a sheet and nothing is selected, it displays the sheet information or sheet properties on the left in the property area. Here I can see the sheet properties for the sheet being displayed. Some of these are editable and some are not. As I scroll through the list, I can see the various different elements that I can view on the sheet. If you click the title block properties are listed on the left in the property area. Again, I'm looking at sheet information from the specific title block. Some of this information again can be changed and some cannot. So you can see you can update various properties on the sheet and on the title block by changing the information within the property window. But let's say you want to change information within the title block and I want to change it across multiple sheets. For example, the owner or project name. How I go about changing that without editing the actual sheet title block? Answer to that is the actual project information. These sheets contain links to that project information. To show that, I'll double click on the title block. This will open the title block, allowing me to edit the title block. Then what I'll do is zoom in on the title block itself and click on client name. Once I click on client name, it highlights the label for client name. To see how it's actually linked to the field in the project properties, click Edit Label on your ribbon. This will show that it's connected to a property called client name. Click OK. And the same thing is true if you were to look at project name, sheet name, and the other variables listed on the actual title block. I'm done modifying. I'm just going to X out of the actual title block edit mode. And I'm going to say no, I do not want to save any changes I made. So to see this information being updated then, let's look at our information for this project. Let's go to the Manage tab on your ribbon, and on the Manage tab in the Settings area, click Project Information. This will display the information for the project, but also information that the title block reads. For instance, the actual client name, which would be owner, the actual project name, which is displayed right now as project name. So owner, I could change to my name. I'll just type in temp. Project name, I'll call ABC. Project number, maybe I'll call 123. Now when I click OK, this information will be updated not only on this sheet, but across all of my sheets. So if I were to look at another sheet, for example, the electrical power riser diagram sheet, I could see the same information is updated in this sheet. Likewise, if I look at my panel schedule sheet, the information is updated here. So as a review, in this lesson, we looked at sheet and title block properties. We viewed the properties in the properties area on the left of the sheet, and likewise did the same thing if we clicked on the title block. We also looked at how we can update information across multiple sheets or all of our sheets by changing the project information. We also actually opened the title block and looked at the field codes and how they're edited and linked to the actual labels so we know what is updated from the project information. In this lesson, we'll cover placing views on sheets. So we currently have a blank sheet and we need to place a view on the sheet. The technique to place a view is simply drag and drop. So scroll in your project browser to the view you would like to place on your sheet. In this case, look for the view called North Level 1 HVAC Plan. When you find it, left-click on it to highlight it, then hold the left mouse button down over top of it, drag your mouse out to the screen, and release the left mouse button. This will drag the view out to the sheet, and then simply move the mouse to where you want to place the view and left-click again. Click in the background anywhere to deselect the view. To place another view, even if the view is of a different type, for example, a section view, select the view that you want to place. In this example, I'm going to use the typical room WSHP view. Drag it out to your sheet, release the mouse, then move the mouse where you want to place the view on the sheet, and left-click again. Again, click in the background to deselect. In this lesson, we looked at placing views on sheets. Basically, select the view that you want to place, hold the left mouse button down on it, drag it out to your sheet, position it on the sheet, and then release the mouse. One thing to note for your views when placing on sheets, a view can only exist on one sheet. If you need to create a view on multiple sheets, you'll have to duplicate that view. In this lesson, we'll cover editing views on sheets. So let's say you placed a view on your sheet and it's the wrong scale. You want to either make it larger or smaller, or you need to reposition it. How do we go about doing that? Let's use the example we see on our screen. If you want to reposition a view, simply mouse over the view till it highlights, select the viewport, and then use your move command to move it wherever you want on your sheet. If you want to rescale or resize the view, select the viewport again if it's not currently selected, and then in the properties area on the left, change the view scale to its new scale. I'll make mine 1 to 50. Now you can also change other properties for this view as well. By scrolling up and down in the property area, you can see the different properties that you have the ability to change. We're only changing the view scale. Click Apply after you change the scale to 1 to 50. Now the view scales, but it's in the incorrect position. So again, let's select the view, and then with my Move command, I can move the view to its current position. Now if you want to move the title mark by itself, without anything selected, just choose the title mark, and then you can move it independently of the view. However, if you want to elongate the title mark line, you first have to select the view, then you'll see the drag handle. Then you could drag that handle, elongating or shortening the title mark line. To deselect any of this, just click in the background to deselect. So as a review, we covered editing views on sheets. We looked at methods to move a view, to rescale or resize the view, to reposition the title mark independently, and also to resize the title mark line. In this lesson, we'll cover working inside views. So let's say you're looking at a sheet and looking at a view on a sheet, you notice something in that view within your model needs to change. What do? Well, you could go back to the view that shows the model, or you could activate this view and work on the model inside of the view directly from the sheet. How do you do that? Well, one method is if you click on the viewport itself, you'll have an option on the ribbon on the very right to activate the view. Clicking Activate View will activate the view that you can now select elements, components, details, whatever is inside of that view and make your edits. To deactivate the view, simply right-click your mouse and choose Deactivate View. Another method is to simply double-click the view. Double-clicking the view will activate the view as well. Again, right-click outside of the view to deactivate the view. If you have multiple views on one sheet, you can activate one and then activate another, and then deactivate all your views. So as a review, in this lesson, we looked at working inside views. We looked at how to activate a view so we can work within that view directly from the sheet. In this lesson, we'll cover adding revisions. So let's say you've worked on your project and you notice something that needs to be revised. You need to make a revision. How do you go about doing that inside of Revit? Well, you can create the revision on the actual view, or you can create the revision on the sheet. In this lesson, we'll use the revision or the sheet. So looking at my sheet, I need to make a revision in the upper view, my electrical plan. So to create the revision, let's go to the View tab. Then in the Sheet Composition area of the panel, second icon in, choose Sheet Issue Revisions. This will bring up the revision box and allow me to add in a new revision. Currently listed is the revision we're adding right now. And I could choose my numbering scheme. I'm leaving it set to numeric. I can enter in a date. It could be today's date, or it could be whatever date you want to create. Next is the description of the revision. What needs to be revised? And I could just say electrical panel, or what was revised. You have issued and issued to. Basically, if I issue or it's issued to someone, I can't create additional clouds or markups. So I'm not going to fill those in just yet. And then my last option, show, I want to show the cloud and the tag on the drawing itself. Now the Add button on the right will add a new revision, but before I would do that, I would need to add a tag and a cloud to my actual drawing. I can number this by project or by sheet, basically meaning that if it's numbered by project, and this is revision number 1, this will show up as revision number 1 on the sheet for the tag and for the schedule. Go ahead and click OK. This will add the revision, which would then show up in a revision table. Now to add the revision mark or the cloud, let's go to the Annotate tab. On the Annotate tab, click Revision Cloud. Revit will now ask you to start drawing lines defining the area that you want to revise. And I'll just start to click, and by clicking, I'm actually drawing this cloud around the area that I want to revise. And I can see on the left in the project area, it's tied to revision number 1. When I'm done actually drawing cloud lines, click the green check mark to place the cloud. Now, if you need to make a tag for this revision, I can go to the Annotate tab again, click Tag by Category, and then simply select the revision cloud. Now, if you do not have a tag already loaded, say yes, we want to add a tag, double-click the Annotations folder, and then scroll down to where we have Revision Tag. Select it, click Open, and then once again, choose the revision cloud, and then it'll actually place the tag, and then you can position it where you want. When done, simply click Modify, and the tag, revision cloud, and revision have been created within your drawing. So as a review, we looked at adding revisions. We looked at adding a revision on the sheet, but you can also add a revision to the view. First thing is you need to add a revision. We defined the revision numbering scheme. We defined the date and what was being revised, and chose to show the tag and the mark. Then we went to the Annotation tab, and we added the cloud, and then we tagged the cloud associated to the revision that we just created. In this lesson, we'll look at adding dimensions to our views. So looking at this view currently, I have various panels laid out in a section of my building, and I want to place a few dimensions around one of my panels. So let's go ahead and zoom in on the second level. And let's add a few dimensions to the panel on the right. To add those dimensions, let's go to the Annotate tab. Once on the Annotate tab, I can choose one of the dimension tools to use. I'll use the Align dimension. So click Align. Now Revit will ask me to pick 2 entities or lines to align the dimension to. I'm going to pick the bottom horizontal line of the panel on the right. Then I'll move my mouse down and select the top of the finished floor. Then, finally, I'll move the position and drop the dimension by left-clicking. Now I'm still in the dimension command, so I can add more dimensions. This time I'll click to the right of the panel, then I'll click to the right of it, selecting the right of the face of the wall on the right. And then I'll drag my mouse to place the dimension. Now you can reposition the dimension. I can move the witness line, and I can move the anchor point as well by dragging the grips or the drag handles to position. I can also drag the text if it's interfered with lines or other objects in space. To deselect, simply click Modify. Now the text scale and text size is controlled by the view scale. Right now my view scale is 1 to 100. So as we place this view on a sheet, all text, including arrowheads or points or ticks, would scale appropriately based on the scale of the view on the sheet. So as a review, in this lesson we looked at adding dimensions to our views. We looked at methods of dropping those dimensions, modifying those dimensions, moving the text as a dimension, and then discussed about the view being placed on the sheet and how the scale would control the actual dimension size. In this lesson, we'll cover tags and text. We need to tag our duct system and all the elements within the duct system. We also want to add text, maybe with an arrow pointing to part of our duct system. To add tags and text, we need to go to the Annotate tab. On the Annotate tab, in the Tag area, I'll choose Tag by Category. Once I select Tag by Category, Revit will ask me to move over something to tag and then left-click on it. So let's say I move over one of the air terminals, a supply diffuser on the left. I'll see a tag appear. If I like that, go ahead and left-click. If you click something that does not have a tag loaded, Revit will prompt you to load a tag. If I move over one of the ducts, I'll see a tag for bottom of duct with an elevation above the level it's bound to. Left-click to place it. Likewise, I can click one of the diffusers on the right. Selecting it will place the actual tag. And you can always move the tag with the Move tool. You can always change the orientation or the actual extension line by dragging the handle. When you're done tagging, simply click Modify. Now, if you want to add text, go to the Annotate tab again, to the Text panel, and click Text. On the right, you can change the format of your text. Let's say I want to add text with 2 segments. Select it. Before adding the text, all the way on the left, change the actual text font and height that you want to use. I'll leave mine set to 1.5 millimeters. Finally, move your mouse out to the Revit window and click where you want the arrow to be placed. After you click where the arrow is placed, drag the line away for the first segment, click for the second segment, and then simply add text for what you want to key in. In this case, I'm just typing diffuser. Now, I can always select this text, bold it, underline it, or italic, change the other font as far as how it's justified, or if I'm done, simply click Modify. So as a review, in this lesson, we looked at tags and text. We looked at tagging our mechanical equipment, in this case our ducts and our diffusers, using tags within Revit MEP. You can always load additional tags into the system if you wanted to. If something you clicked was not tagged or didn't have a tag loaded, it would prompt you to load a tag. We also looked at adding text using the text command on the Annotate tab. By selecting the various types of tools to format our text and our text styles, we can add text using arrows or no arrows. In this lesson, we'll look at printing our sheets. So if we want to print a sheet from Revit, we'll view the sheet, go to the large R in the upper left, down to Print, and then on the flyout, choose Print again. The Print View window will now appear. We can select the printer on the top, and what do we want to print? All the sheets, selected sheets, or just the current sheet? If you click Setup in the bottom right, this is where we can set the paper size, how we want the paper oriented or placed, centered or offset. Do we want to fit the page or zoom? Do we want to hide any elements? Also, our orientation, portrait or landscape, for hidden line views, vector or raster, and for appearance, our quality for our images. Do we want to print in color, or black and white, or grayscale? You can save this as a profile as well too, so that you could recall at a later point. Just click Cancel. Always do a preview before printing, and then when you're ready to print, simply click OK. Click Close for this example. As a review, in this lesson we covered printing. We looked at the Print dialog box and the various settings to set when we print.